Today, our Revised Common Lectionary reading, which unites us with Christian worship throughout the world on this date. The Old Testament reading is taken from the prophet Isaiah. Now, in the wonderful book of Isaiah, we find many prophecies regarding the coming of the Messiah, or the Greek name, the Christ. And so this is speaking to us of the quality of the Christ coming into the world and being born through an individual who comes in the line of King David's family. But upon this humbled ground, a tiny shoot, hopeful and promising, will sprout from Jesse's stump. A branch will emerge from his roots to bear fruit. And on this child from King David's line, the Spirit of the Eternal One will alight and rest. By the Spirit of wisdom and discernment, he will shine like the dew. By the Spirit of counsel and strength, he will judge fairly and act courageously. By the Spirit of knowledge and reverence of the Eternal One, he will take pleasure in honoring the Eternal. He will determine fairness and equity. He will consider more than what meets the eye and weigh in more than what he's told, so that even those who can't afford a good defense will nevertheless get a fair and equitable judgment. With just a word, he will end wickedness and abolish oppression. With nothing more than the breath of his mouth, he will destroy evil. He will clothe himself with righteousness and with truth. The impulse to right wrongs will be in his blood. With unwavering steps and integrity uncompromised, he will establish peace. Thanks be to God for the power of the Word. Today we do turn our attention to this concept of peace. Inner peace, as Daily Word describes it, or names it, but this quality that begins within our hearts. You see, just as Isaiah and other prophets would speak of the coming of the Messiah, of the Christ, they would speak of the qualities, and they would dwell upon those qualities, holding them in mind and heart. And so that's what we do with our season of Advent. We take these particular qualities, we dwell on them in our spiritual practice, however we do that, and when we come together in Sunday services, we hold these thoughts of hope and faith, today peace, next week love, and ultimately joy. Why do we do that? Well, it's as if we are building a manger, a place within us for the birthing, the rebirthing, if you will, of the Christ child within us. Yes, these use biblical and ancient images. At Christmas, we're often call upon phrases from the Bible. Many of us just naturally speak the King James English of the Bible and find ourselves speaking in slightly different forms of the language because we so associate that with the telling of the Christmas story at this time of year. But it's not necessary to speak it in King James English, nor even to have these images. These are all tools and assists for us to build during this Advent to Christmas the right soul mood that can claim on Christmas Eve as it turns into Christmas Day a true understanding, a true meaning. That the original goodness God created is being reborn within us, as it came in a very profound and full way in the child, Jesus, who would do the work of the Christ in a profound way upon this earth. But the journey is far from over, because we continue the journey. This is our essential teaching, to do, as we say in the Lord's Prayer, the will that is established in heaven or in spiritual truth, to do it in the world, on earth. So last week we looked at this concept of hope, or in our unity tradition we often prefer the word faith, as Charles Fillmore described faith as a more mature form of hope. But I like kind of working with the continuum. We begin with hope because we begin with a seeking or a yearning for a greater good. Some of you that were here last week enjoyed my singing. All I want for Christmas is a hippopotamus. That famous song from the 50s or 60s that described the child's vision of what Christmas was all about. Yes, they may direct it toward a hippopotamus or a Tonka truck or some special toy, but in their mind, that is a greater good. They are seeking a greater good in their life, but in their immature way, they think it may be in a special toy or a hippopotamus. As we mature in our life, we adults stop thinking so much about all of the things that we can acquire, especially if we filled our house with things. I was decorating this week and opened a box and was bringing things out from my childhood, and that was a long time ago. Little decorations that I've been toting around as reminders of the Christmas of my youth, and so I enjoyed hanging them in my apartment. But as we reflect on what Christmas truly means to us as a spiritual reality, a spiritual experience of God within, of God's Christ or individualized truth being born within us, we look beyond the outer things that we may want, books, and, well, maybe some of us still want some toys. They're just bigger toys now, like cars and flat screen TVs and things like that. And that's well and good. As Jesus said, the Father knows that we want or need certain things in life, and so that is fine. But for a true experience of Christmas, we need to do this inner preparatory work. And that is what Advent, that is what nativity scenes, that's what stories are about. To teach us of that first step of desiring, seeking, yearning for a greater good in our life. Secondly, how will that greater good, that realization of the very spirit of divine life, come to us if we are, as Daily Word described, finding ourselves during December in many states of anxiety and stress? So our next step in the Advent to Christmas is this quality of peace. This quality of peace in our hearts rather than anxiety and stress. Now sometimes when you're looking or working with a key word, sometimes you can glean some insight or a starting point by simply looking at a traditional dictionary. And I found just what I expected as I looked up the word peace. I'll go through these quickly because I just want you to get the gist of it. First definition: the normal, non-warring condition of a nation, group of nations, or the world. an agreement or treaty between warring or antagonistic nations, groups, etc., to end hostilities and abstain from further fighting, a state of mutual harmony between peoples or groups, the normal freedom from civil commotion and violence, cessation of or freedom from any strife or dissension, freedom of the mind from annoyance, distraction, anxiety, a state of tranquility or serenity. See how far we had to go down the line before we got a description of peace as an inner state or consciousness of tranquility. So most of the definitions, and therefore many of us carry in our mind, that peace is about the absence of violence, the absence of war, or even disharmony in our relationships. But Jesus taught a peace that was positive in the sense that it had its own reality and existence. He offered those words, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give you as the world gives." So he was talking about a consciousness of God's goodwill toward creation, of a greater, higher good. And this is a consciousness that we can receive from Spirit and build and nurture within ourselves. Quite a different idea from saying, well, I'm going to make peace with Belinda today. We've not been getting along. So we have to come to some kind of agreement. We may even have to write it down in a little treaty, if you will, that we're going to lay aside our differences. That's the world's peace. That's people of the world getting along and ceasing difficulty through agreement. And that's a good thing in its way in the outer world. But our peace that Advent is calling us to for a true deep Christmas experience or Christ experience is built upon a peace within us that we nurture. This peace is something that one of the minor prophets in the Hebrew tradition, the last in the Hebrew Scriptures, Zechariah, described when speaking again of the coming Messiah, the exalted one, the Son or expression from the infinite God. He makes a statement that this exalted one will speak peace to the heathen, will speak peace to the heathen. Now that has been changed in more modern translations of the Bible to, and he will speak peace to the nations, to the world. But that older use of the word heathen I found very interesting because Charles Fillmore spoke of that scripture. And he said the heathen are not out there. The heathen are the unredeemed thought people, the unredeemed ideas and feelings within our own heart and mind. And if in our spiritual practice we will devote some time to being in the silence, we will hear that divine Christ voice or impulse speaking the qualities of peace to those inner warring factions within us. I'll confess it. I have, a few times in my entire life, heard a little warring voice within my mind. Warring in the sense that it spoke in a, well, I'll even say violent, but an angry way. It spoke to me within of another person. Harshly, critically, judgmentally. Those are just the little thought people, as Charles Fillmore called them, within me, or the heathen, the unredeemed, that need to hear the word of Christ. But how is that going to happen if in my rushing about during the Christmas season, during December, let's say, I just can't make any time because I had to make a fancy cake for potluck today, and I have to go to this event and that event, and I have shopping to do, and I've already written 60 Christmas cards and sent them out, and I have more to do. Yes, this time of year, perhaps it's even easier than the rest of the year to be rushed, stressed. We have all these things. Many a parent and a single adult knows this, that there are more preparations to make, more things to buy, gifts to purchase. All of that on top of our regular routine. I don't know about any of you, but work doesn't get set aside for the month of December. Now we have even more. And that can be difficult. I have known more than one individual in my life. My best friend back in New York State is one of them. He dreads the Christmas season, and I think, how sad. But I can also understand. He and his ex-wife tried to do the very best for their one child, and through the years, purchasing all that that child desired on their modest income, that was stressful. And he struggled so year after year because he wanted that greater good for his son. Of course he did. But coupled with all that he had to do and with an income that was not large, that was an even greater hardship than the rest of the whole year. So in that habit and in that practice, Christmas time became a trial for him, something he dreaded. He can't even, and I learned not to go anywhere near Christmas decorations when I still lived in New York, because it was just going to make him feel stressed. So for some of us, we have to make a conscious effort, a real effort in our spiritual life, our prayer time. And remember, that can be simply 5 minutes at the beginning or end of your day. If you'll truly devote yourself to it, 5 minutes can do a tremendous amount of good, setting the tone for your day or reflecting on the day that you've had and doing this inner work. It's not I that promise you, but tradition and life promises you that the effort you make in your own spiritual preparation as we approach the day of Christmas will have everything to do with your experience of Christmas, at least within your own heart. I want to share a reading in closing, because sometimes, whether it's the Bible or something more recently written, sometimes when we hear that people were struggling with the same thing we're struggling with today, but maybe 100 years ago, like our unity history, we realize that this is not an unusual thing to struggle with this time of Christmas. But there's always a way that we can find our way to the light. These words were written in 1920 by Rudolf Steiner. For many modern people, Christmas is nothing but an occasion for giving and receiving presents, something they celebrate each year through habit. The Christmas festival has become an empty phrase, like so many other things in outer life. This must change in the future, so that instead of acting out of old habits, we act out of fresh, new insight and feeling. If we cannot find the inner courage needed for this, then we must share in the lie, which keeps the annual Christmas festival something void of real meaning, and we celebrate it without any true feeling. Do we really rise to the highest concerns of humanity when we give and receive presents at Christmas each year out of habit? We should forbid ourselves from perpetuating this inner hollowness of Christmas celebration. We should make the inner decision to imbue this festival with true and worthy content, one which raises humanity to the meaning of its very existence. Ask yourself, dear friends, whether the feelings in your hearts and souls when you stand before the Christmas tree and open the presents given out of habit and the Christmas cards containing empty, tired phrases. Ask yourselves whether feelings are living in you that can raise mankind to an understanding of the sense and meaning of its evolution on earth. And so in these words of caution, or perhaps even warning, we still find power. And why do I say that? Because such words as these, such traditions as Advent, always return our attention to who has the power. Who has the power to create your Christmas? Who has the power to find those inner gifts for which you long? You do. You do. And so, just as unity has always taught about the prayer process, or call it meditation if you choose, the Fillmores, I think, were quite wise. You know, in their day, meditation was still associated with the Eastern religious tradition. And so they chose the word silence. Silence. To be willing to be still, to set aside your outer activity and turn within. And the Fillmores and other great teachers through history have taught that if we're willing to turn within, we will find the inner realities that God has created within our soul and spirit. And we'll be able to call them forth to guide our outer action, so that we won't be like sleepwalkers walking through Camdenton buying gifts just because that's what we've always done. But we'll be conscious in our actions. And if we choose to purchase an item to give to a family member or friend, great. But we'll feel it more deeply. We'll enjoy the giving even more, because we know that in that gift we're giving a sign to a friend or family member that says, I care. I love you. And I want you to have this token, something you will enjoy, something that will enhance your life. Well, as a conclusion to my lesson, I want to turn your attention to something simple yet profound. And, as Dr. Steiner said, it is possible that we could fall into habitual action, a mindless action. And what is that? Most every church in the unity movement ends its services with "Let there be peace on earth." When we sing that, we know that we are joining with unity centers and churches throughout the world in singing forth those words. But it's very important that we keep them alive within us. I had a teacher, and she came from Catholic tradition. And she was teaching me some of the basic unity courses as I prepared to go into the ministerial school. And I asked her one time at the end of one of our private classes, I said, well, I'm just curious if you would share with me why you left the Catholic Church and came to unity. And she said, well, we do so many things in the Catholic Church by rote, by habit. We just do them over and over and over, and that became very meaningless to her. And she said, oh, we've got to end this session. Let's say our prayer for protection. Do you see? Whether something becomes habitual or a worn-out phrase is entirely up to you. I do this myself in our services when we end. When I'm singing or when we do the prayer for protection, I'm always looking inwardly. How can I enliven this for me? When I say the light of God surrounds us, what can I do to make that new and fresh every time I speak of it? Well, sometimes I dwell on the noun, the light. Sometimes I dwell on the verb, the light surrounds. The love enfolds. Our young people like to do movements sometimes to that prayer. But you do whatever you need to do, and the same with the peace song, the same with anything. The same with relationships. All of it. It's up to you to keep it fresh and newborn. So let us turn our attention within for a time of silence. We'll simply speak our denial and affirmation. I promised you that 5 minutes truly in the silence does powerful work. And so I'll stick to that promise this morning. I invite you to turn your attention within. To close your eyes if you choose, but to shift your awareness from the outer world of activity, even here in our church this morning, even in this service, and to retire to the very center of your being. As we establish ourselves in peace and silence, the still small voice, as Ezekiel called it, this voice that speaks to the immature ideas and feelings within us, a Christ voice that calls us into peace. If there is any sense of disharmony or struggle with today or this past week, it is in the silence of prayer and meditation that we call forth and cling to the truth of our being as God's creation. Let us hold this denial statement that rejects an idea that is not Christ-like. As God's creation, I am not an expression of violence. I am a being of peace. Through the Christ impulse within me, I am free from any warring thoughts or feelings. For Christ reveals peace to my soul. I now affirm, make solid in my consciousness the truth of my being. My spiritual nature is an everlasting light within that shall never fail to inspire hope, establish peace, radiate love, and express joy. Spiritual peace is born through my faith in God's good will toward creation. So for a moment in the silence, in your own way, the Christ presence is always with you, declaring truth, goodness, beauty. Be still and know that I am God. And gently I invite you to allow your attention to move from the sacred center, this holy of holies within you, and to return again to your physical senses. As you're ready, gently open your eyes.